It's Kate.
And Oliver Hudson. Host of the new podcast, Sibling
Revelry.
That's right.
We started this show because, you know what? No one talks about siblings and that dynamic.
The siblings, they know each other better than anybody.
Yes.
You know.
Listen to Sibling Revelry on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi, I'm Frances Fry.
And I'm Ann Morris.
And we are the hosts of a new TED podcast called Fixable.
We've helped leaders at some of the world's most competitive companies solve all kinds of problems.
On our show, we'll pull back the curtain and give you the type of honest, unfiltered advice we usually reserve for top executives. Give us a call and we'll help you solve the problems you're stuck on. Listen to Fixable on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Episode 235, Frugal Friends Book Club, 4 books to read this fall.
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast, where you'll learn to save money, embrace simplicity, and live a richer life. Here are your hosts, Jen and Jill.
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast. My name is Jen.
My name is Jill.
And if you are an OG Frugal Friends listener, you will remember that we used to have the Frugal Friends Book Club.
And everyone says, bring it back.
Yep. And it was a new book we would read every month, and we would usually have the author on. And we are bringing it back. We're bringing it back.
In this way, you mean with this episode?
Yes, we're bringing it back. And so we're going to let you know the books that are coming up on the, we're going to say all 4 today. And some of them will be on the podcast. It's TBD, all of them, because there's 4. So we picked them based on what we wanted to read, not who could come on the show. Mm-hmm. But we're hoping. We are attempting.
And, I'll say this disclaimer. I do read, but mostly things related to the mental health field. So I'm not much of a fiction reader or anything that is not mental health and has helped me to gain and maintain my licensure. I just don't have too much time for additional reading. So I'm here for it, but there's been episodes in the past that were primarily for me, and there's episodes that are primarily for Jen. This one falls under the latter category. Jen is much more of an expert on the new and up and coming books and what's out there and what's the best thing to read for personal finance and other self-help.
And that
seriously, it's so funny because I do like reading, but I looked through my bookshelf in preparation for this episode, and I'm like, yeah, none of this is going to be relevant to 98% of people out there. So I'm going to let Jen do the picking and most of the talking, and I'm here for it. And I'll read one of these. We'll get into it.
Yeah, don't feel pressure to read all 4, but these are just the ones we're throwing out. So, but first, this episode is brought to you by the library. Library is here. You might have forgotten about library with all the Audible ads you're hearing on podcasts. #NotSorry. Thank you, Amazon, for paying my bills. But library wants you to know she is here for you and your book needs. She's got paperback, hardback, audiobooks, even Kindle books. Thank you again, Amazon. So before you go to a big box retailer or online store, look for your books on the library website and or app. And if you go in person, ask your librarian or give them a call. Ask your librarian what perks you get outside of free books. Library. Consider those late fees an investment in your book borrowing future.
Thanks, library.
Yes.
Wow, we do remember you.
My
You're
girl.
not forgotten.
Yeah,
I went
my
in
girl.
person to the library to get my library card, and they were so excited to see a real human being walking into the library.
You should walk into your library. They
come
value
here
you.
more often. And libraries, I know we talk about this all the time, but they also often offer free tickets to local museums. So there's so much to be had at your local library. Check out your library.
You gotta go.
Consider those late fees an investment in your future.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you are looking for an episode to queue up after this, you can pretty much queue up any episode from the first 2 years of the podcast and see what books we were reading. But there's also episode 54, which is Frugal Hobbies, what to do with your free time. Reading is definitely one of those, but there are tons of others. But I would like to get into the way that I picked the 4 books we are reading this fall.
I love this so much.
Because how else do you pick 4 things? When the world is your oyster, how do you pick 4 of anything? And so I went back and I said, well, obviously it's gotta be something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue.
It's how you get dressed for your wedding day, and it's how you pick your books.
For book club. Yes.
I love it.
So we have something older than 5 years old. We have a book that's newer than 1 year old, so less than 1 year old. We have something borrowed from either one of our friends or from our listener suggestions. And then we have something with a blue cover. And that is the only requirement for the last book, is that it must have a blue cover.
I love
and
it
be
so
relevant
much.
to money. Like, these are all in the realm of what you'll hear on the show. So there's no like random books. They're all going to be relevant for our listeners.
So again, this is a what's coming up for book club. Some of these Jen has read, some of them she hasn't. None of them I've read. So I'm just being transparent about that. But here's why we picked them and some of why we want to read these books. So the first one, starting with something old or older than 5 years, not that old. It's The Behavior Gap, Simple Ways to Stop Doing Dumb Things with Money by Carl Richards. And just a quote from the book about the behavior gap, how they present this literary piece of work is, it's not that we're dumb. We're wired to avoid pain and pursue pleasure and security. It feels right to sell when everyone around us is scared and buy when everyone feels great. It may feel right, but it's not rational. And so kind of talking through some of the mindsets and behaviors around why we do the things that we do, like why we want to read this book, why we picked this book is that, we've all had those moments of asking ourselves, why do I keep doing this thing, even though it's not good for me? Or I keep saying I don't want to do this thing, yet I keep finding myself doing that thing, engaging in the behaviors that I say aren't life-giving to me. Why am I doing that? And again, as the book said, it's not that we're dumb. It has to do with some of those deeper wirings and experiences. And so the book will break that down more. And particularly as it relates to spending and mindset and behavior, we love it when we're able to identify where those crossovers are and just understand ourselves better so that we can live in a more beneficial way in all aspects of life. So that's The Behavior Gap. We're going to get into that one. Again, it's by Carl Richards. Anything else you want to say about that, Jen?
Yeah, I will just read some of like the other topics that are in the book, because that's what kind of made me pick it. So we won't just talk about, investing, like the tendency to buy high and sell low, which is important. I know a lot of people new to investing do have the question, like when we hit the bear market, it's like, should I stop investing? Should I sell something? And this is going to help you figure out like the wiring behind why you were there. But to avoid the pitfalls of generic financial advice, to invest all of your assets, so including time and energy. So we say a lot of the time, like for frugality, it's not just being a good steward of your financial resources, but also your time, your energy, your physical space. So this goes into that as well. So investing all of your assets, as he calls it, as well as savings, investing all of your assets more wisely. To quit spending money and time on things that don't matter. I think that's the time portion is another thing we don't look at a lot, is we will overly focus on the spending money portion. But not paying as much attention is how can we quit spending time on things that don't matter. You'll identify your real financial goals, start meaningful conversations about money, which I also am very interested in, simplify your financial life, and then stop losing money. So I really like this. So this is one, Carl Richards writes a blog for the New York Times where he's famous for his very simple drawings that illustrate financial concepts. And so this is definitely one that I would try to get the paperback or hardback version of so that you can see those drawings versus the audiobook version, or get both and listen to the audiobook, but have the actual book like in front of you or with you. So that is my recommendation for that one. Then next, we've got something newer than 1 year. So this one came out this year, and I know a lot of you are fans of this podcast, but it's The Lazy Genius Kitchen. Have what you need, use what you have, and enjoy it like never before by Kendra Adachi of the Lazy Genius podcast. And I'm just getting into her. I'm just getting into her podcast, I guess, but I also into her. But yeah, like I am very impressed by her philosophy on life. And it's very much how we view frugality too. It's like being genius in the things that matter and being really lazy in the things that don't, but like still need to get done. And so like that's her whole philosophy. And that's what we love too, is being really efficient and really smart in the big things that matter and just getting through the things that don't. So that's the 80-20 principle, like kind of rebranded. And this is just focused on that concept in the kitchen. So this is, everybody's asking how to save money on food. And I really think it just comes down to which strategies you use, is finding a strategy that works for you. And so I think this, and I haven't read it yet. I haven't read any of these books yet. These are books I want to read. But having the just introducing one more strategy for this. So I'm really excited to get into this one.
It's super practical too. This is an exciting book. If I were to pick one from the list, it might be this one or the next one that we're about to read off. But like you're saying, Jen, everybody's wondering, how can I streamline in my kitchen? And what can I be doing better? What am I missing here? How can this be more enjoyable? Greater ease, less food waste, yummy stuff. And this just seems like it hits all of those categories. So I love it when there's just a practical book like this that really does solve a problem. And we know food. We love food. We eat food every day, and yet it still poses so many issues and barriers for us, especially as it relates to our wallets.
And I love that this isn't a recipe book. This isn't a cookbook. This is an actual book about how to make it easier to eat the food you have at home. That's all we're looking for, right? So some of what the book will teach you is to name what matters to you in the kitchen. So whether that's flavor, convenience, or something else entirely, I think that's super important. Everyone's going to value something else in something different in the kitchen. And so for me, for instance, I'd love to be this very good cook and enjoy making these very cool things, but it's not me. Convenience. It's convenience for me. So to be honest with myself about what matters to me and what I value, and not try and be someone else or someone what Instagram or social, any social media is telling me is better, is super important. So I really resonate with this. Some other things the book will teach is to feed your people with efficiency and ease. Apply a simple, actionable 5-step process to multiple areas of your kitchen, empowering you to enjoy your kitchen the way you've always wanted. And she lays out the 5-step process: prioritize, essentialize, organize, personalize, and systematize. And she says, you don't need magical recipes, fancy gadgets, or daunting lists to follow to the letter. You just need a framework that works whether you're cooking for 1 or for 20. And so this sounds very cool to me.
One of the things I appreciate about the standards of new books coming out, I think this has always been a relative standard, is what gaps exist. Oftentimes when books are published and written, it's because there's a gap in the information. Similar with research that is done. There's a gap. We don't know what we don't know, and someone needs to write on it. Someone needs to research on it. And this is a very clear gap. We've got plenty of books out there filled with recipes. Yeah, we don't need another cookbook, but how do we work in the kitchen? Many of us just jump to the cookbook, but we don't know how to move about and make the most of that space and our appliances. And so, yeah, for so many reasons, I'm really excited about that perspective.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So, buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So, how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing. And of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/strategic. That's oracle.com/strategic. oracle.com/strategic.
Discover the heartwarming and hilarious world of sibling connections on Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson.
You might be asking yourself, what is sibling revelry?
Yeah, well, we just made it up.
They'll have some laughs and maybe inspire some people along the way with universal tales of what it's like to grow up with brothers and sisters.
We're full-blood siblings, the only full-blood sibling.
In our family. Well, not in the world. I mean...
No, in the whole world. That's just it. Like, no one...
Dive into family tales and explore the human mind with guests like Joel and Benji Madden.
And it's fun because we've decided to open it up, to really like all kinds of different siblings. And it's going to be an awesome season.
It's more than a podcast. It's a celebration of the ties that bind us. Listen to Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, the next category, something borrowed. This is borrowed from our listeners, recommended, but we're going with the theme. So The Conscious Closet, The Revolutionary Guide to Looking Good While Doing Good by Elizabeth L. Klein. And the reason we picked this one, it came out in 2019, but unlike other things that came out pre-pandemic, it is still relevant. And we're coming to learn more and more about how cheap clothing does cost us a lot. It's not just about the price tag on the clothing, but how it was made and how long it's going to last us. So whether we're impulse buying clothing on sale or buying clothes that don't last, changing the way we buy clothes will not only save us money in the long run, but it will better the lives of even the people who are making the clothing. And so as we become more astute to the practices of the clothing industry and fashion industry, I think it does bear weight on the choices that we make. We are then responsible for, okay, how do we pair our understanding and some of the changes and shifts we want to make with a frugal mindset as well? And the two can go hand in hand. Of course, there's offshoots of ways that we can spend tons of money on our closets by doing good. But I think there's this really nice pairing where we can be conscious consumers and live frugally and values-based. So I'm really excited about this book as well. Again, I think it speaks to that practical level of how do we shop sustainably and in an eco-friendly way, in a way that cares for the people who have actually set their hands to making our clothing. So I think this is another needed one that solves another problem that we have. And not just learning more about the fashion industry, but okay, what can we do? Brings it down to that micro level. And how do I engage with this very necessary item? I need clothing, but how can I do this in a sustainable way?
Yeah, I am physically borrowing this book from our friend Lisa Rowan, who you will remember from the Money Hacks episode. And so that's why this is the first borrowed book of this round of the Frugal Friends Book Club. But I did ask you guys for recommendations, and you guys had a lot of good ones. And so they will be making them on future book club episodes. But I really am excited to read this one, mostly because of the reviews. So I didn't want it to be like somebody just telling me buy ethical brands that are like $100 a shirt and then just buy fewer of them. But I wanted like other alternatives. So the very first review was like, absolutely amazing read. Because of this book, I now wash my clothes differently, I buy differently, I store differently, and I repair more. The book teaches you how to do simple repairs and what techniques to use while testing clothes in the store before buying. And then someone else said, quote unquote, closet contentment is what I'm seeking after a big project in the coming weeks to weed out my unworn, unattractive clothing. So I would love to reach some closet contentment as well. I'm pretty content with my clothes, but just to have like a better perspective and more affirmation of why, buying used is so important, and why I don't buy as many clothes is, I think, going to be really motivating for me.
Yeah, I think coming out of my 20s, where I felt like for me, my 20s was very much a lot of how can I get the things that I want inexpensively. Sometimes that meant cheaply, and not really aware. And some of that might have been personal. Some of that might have been just the information available to us a decade ago of just, buying the $2 shirt at the mall and just being so excited that I got a deal, but not thinking about the other aspects and the ripple effects. And I think, now that I'm kind of at a sustainable body type, and that's probably not going to change that much. I don't anticipate another growth spurt, and just greater awareness of where are my things coming from and wanting them to last for a while, and seeing the difference between quality and something cheaply made. And I think just for a lot of reasons, this aligns with personally where I'm at, and already starting to take in more information about this. But all right, how does this inform my spending? So yeah, excited about that book.
All right. So our last book on the book club, Something with a Blue Cover. And y'all would be very interested to know that there are a lot of books with blue covers.
Yes, there are.
Like, it is a very common cover color. So I was skeptical when I was like, oh no, but how am I going to do the something blue, like that I only can choose from blue covers? But I had no trouble choosing. I actually had like 3 blue covers, and even like, this isn't the only blue cover on the list. The Behavior Gap is also a blue cover.
Yes.
So
multiple blue.
No shortage of blue covers. But for this first iteration of bringing back the book club, we are going with The Good Money Revolution: How to Make More Money to Do More Good by Derek Kinney, who you will remember we had on the show recently, talking about your generosity purpose. And I mean, I picked this one just because, like, aside from the cover being blue, we loved our interview with Derek Kinney. Like, it was really good.
his perspective on generosity. And I think we talked about that during the interview, how much more we need to have those conversations about being generous, even for those of us frugally minded and maybe even a little bit wanting to hoard our cash. But this is a real aspect of the financial decisions that we make and what can bring about that purpose and fulfillment as we make money. And it's not to deprivation. It's make more, enjoy life, and give more. So just such a cool perspective and conversation about generosity that I'm sure will be even more expounded upon within this book.
Yeah. So this is one that focuses kind of more on like definitely maybe white collar or business owners, or I don't know. It's definitely gonna, I think he was saying when we were talking with him, like a lot of his clients were making good money, but they just weren't motivated to like do it more. Like they wanted to retire because they were just bored in their jobs. And then something that really worked for getting these people re-energized and like loving their work again was introducing this concept of generosity and figuring, okay, what's your passion? What do you really care about? And how can you invest more in that by making more money in your business? And I think that the same thing can be translated to, just increasing your salary or increasing like the amount of money you bring in overall by decreasing expenses. I think as people who are physically and mentally capable of increasing our incomes, that we kind of have a responsibility to make more money so that we can show better care to those people who physically or mentally cannot increase their incomes, based on circumstance or season or whatever. And so I think it very much challenged me to think outside of, I want to increase my income so I can, buy more stuff. That gets old. That is unfulfilling. And while it's nice, like his clients surely, make enough to cover all of their bills, while a lot of our listeners are trying to make more to, pay off debt, save for a house, stuff like that. I still live by, I think Jill and I live by the adage, like what you do with little is indicative of what you will do with a lot. And so while we're not going to be, funding, entire Habitat for Humanity houses or anything like that, like still showing care to those around us can help us desire to make more money and know that making more money isn't evil. It's not bad. It doesn't turn you into a bad person. It doesn't have to turn you into a bad person. And so I think this book is really made for that mindset.
Yeah, well said. You know what we have proven we've been able to do a lot with a little. You don't need a lot. You'd be responsible with the little thing like this. The Bill of the Week.
That's right. It's time for the best minute of your entire week. Maybe a baby was born and his name is William. Maybe you paid off your mortgage. Maybe your car died and you're happy to not have to pay that bill anymore. Duck bills, Buffalo Bills, Bill Clinton. This is the Bill of the Week.
Didn't know where you were going with that. I wanted you to get there, but I didn't know where you were going.
It was a bit of a stretch, but
you did stretch. I was unprepared for it. And,
but you were just patiently waiting.
I wanted you to finish. I wanted you to have a win.
I don't think I got that.
It's okay. It's okay. You can't at 235 episodes, you can't win all 235.
No, I guess not.
But let's see who did win.
Hi, Jen and Jill. My name is Victoria, and I'm from Clearwater, Florida. My Bill of the Week is that I just received word yesterday that my application for overnight summer camp for my daughter was approved. I have been making payments over the last 3 months, but the scholarship covered the last $400. In addition, I also found out about and applied for a local overnight summer camp that is completely free. I am talking about 100% free. This is going to be the most epic summer for both my daughter and me. Bye, ladies.
Oh, that's great, Victoria, that your daughter will experience the freedom of overnight summer camp. You will experience the freedom of her overnight summer camp for a discounted price. That is amazing.
It does sound like an epic summer that you're probably already in the midst of or have just wrapped up by the time we're getting to this bill of the week.
Sorry.
But thank you so much for calling in. You're so local to us. And we love to hear from local people and folks from afar. And so thrilled. It sounds like it was a lot of work for you to be applying for these scholarships and looking into what's available to you. But well done. Your work has paid off and you have just done the work of a fantastic mom to get an amazing summer planned for your daughter. And hopefully you enjoyed it too.
Always worth the work to find out about these scholarships and apply for them. Because you never know like how many people are applying, what the income bracket of the people are applying, unless there's income restrictions, but like you just never know. And so if you're eligible, apply and you could be giving yourself and your child a much needed break.
If you want to submit your bill of the week, whether it's about an epic summer or a low-key summer or no summer, it's winter now, visit frugalfriendspodcast.com/bill. Leave us a bill.
Discover the heartwarming and hilarious world of sibling connections on Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson.
You might be asking yourself, what is sibling revelry?
Yeah, well, we just made it up.
They'll have some laughs and maybe inspire some people along the way with universal tales of what it's like to grow up with brothers and sisters.
We're full-blood siblings, the only full-blood sibling.
In our family. Well, not in the world. I mean...
No, in the whole world. That's just it. Like, no one...
Dive into family tales and explore the human mind with guests like Joel and Benji Madden.
And it's fun because we've decided to open it up, to really like all kinds of different siblings. And it's going to be an awesome season.
It's more than a podcast. It's a celebration of the ties that bind us. Listen to Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
From the studio who brought you the #1 podcast, The Piketon Massacre, this is Murder 101.
A group of high school students started a project to research a string of unsolved murders.
Those murders happened in the mid-1980s.
He's out there doing stuff. He just didn't stop.
Everything that the students predicted through their profile turned out to be accurate.
Redhead killer profile. Male, Caucasian, 5'9" to 6'2", 180 to 270 pounds. Unstable home, absent father and a domineering mother. Right-handed, IQ above 100, most likely heterosexual.
There is no profile of this killer except for the ones the students created.
Just because some of these women no longer have people to speak for them does not mean that they deserve to not be spoken for.
What if this guy's still alive? Like, what if he comes after us?
I said, are you going to kill me? And he said, yes.
Listen to Murder 101 on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And now it's time for
Lightning Round. This will be a kind of 2-part lightning round.
Uh-oh.
Right. Well, because, one part's going to be vulnerable, but the other part, we're just going to talk a little bit more about how to start a book club. If you want to do the book club with your friend, the Frugal Friends Book Club in your community with your friends.
Yay.
But first, let's talk a little bit about fiction. We are going to share... Well, one of us is going to share our 2022 fiction book recommendations.
I'm choosing my own path.
And one of us is choosing our own path.
Yes.
So
you got to do what works for you. Go ahead, Jen. Stick with the script. What's your 2022 fiction book recommendation?
Well, I don't actually know if it came out in 2022. I don't think it did, but I did read it this year, and it is The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I really like Kristen Hanna. I like all of her books. I still think The Nightingale is my favorite, but I really did enjoy The Great Alone, and I really enjoyed The Four Winds. So this was just another home run book. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I enjoyed that one. It was riveting, but it had intimate scenes that were quite graphic for me. And I don't usually get that way, but like it's in books for some reason, it's like worse for me. So I hate those reading about that stuff. But if it doesn't bother you, definitely The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was a good read. I cried at the end of both of these books.
Oh, wow.
The Four Winds. And it's a
Did
good
you
book
read
if
it
I
or did you
cry at
listen
the end.
to audio?
Oh, I always
audiobook?
listen, especially nonfiction books. I only listen to them because they're read. So like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo had 3 audio narrators for the actual person that was like, so the book is in 2 perspectives, but then it also had like these newspaper article, snippets throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a separate person reading the newspaper or magazine snippets.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So for nonfiction, I always do audio because it's just a great experience.
Maybe that's also why you couldn't quite handle the salacious scenes.
Maybe
like
that's
just
it.
in your car driving your kid to daycare.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe that was it. So those are my fiction.
Nice.
I'll give you 2 because
I'm going to give you nothing.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. I am not up with the times. My goodness. I do not know what books are coming out in 2022. So sorry if that's going to bring us both some bad reviews.
I'm not super up with the times either.
But I have to be honest, but I will go along with what you love, Jen, of vulnerability in the lightning round. Something lesser known about me is I really like children's books. I don't know. Take that how you will. Assume what you want of me. Maybe it's because it's at my reading level. But I find children's books to be super heartwarming, fun. One of the things, maybe this is getting too deep, I think when we try to explain concepts to children and simplify it, we have to have a really rich understanding of that thing in order to simplify it. It's something I've noticed with my nieces and nephews when I have to describe something that feels complicated or nuanced, and I try to break it down into kids' terms. I have to have a really good understanding of that thing in order to do that. So I think that's a little part of why I like children's books so much, is they're often breaking down concepts into more simplistic terms that I find really beautiful and rich. Obviously, reading children's books doesn't take up a whole evening. It's like 10 minutes, but that's what I enjoy. And when I read it to a child. So there's a couple that I would recommend if you're on board with me taking this in a weird direction.
No, I'm sure there are parents who would love to hear this. I'd love to hear it because I read Paw Patrol books and there's, I don't think there are any hidden meanings.
So one of my favorites, I've got a lot of favorites when it comes to kids' books. So I know we've only got like a little bit of time, but one of my favorites that I actually own is called If You Find a Rock by Peggy Christian. And this is one of my favorite ones to read to a child because not only is it just a really beautiful book, but it often then lends itself to a fun activity. I also love rocks. There's like a funny story that maybe I'll share in the lightning or like in the after show about
don't talk about
enjoyment.
We don't talk about the after show.
Oh yeah. What after show? What? If you stay past the music, there's more. So It's just all about the different types of rocks that are out there. Honestly, I don't know that there's that much metaphor to it. I love it, and like what you can do with these different rocks. And then you can then have an activity where you go and find different rocks and pebbles and have an adventure with the child that you read that book to. I also really love the book Come Over to My House, Come Over and Play by Dr. Seuss, classic. I think that too, probably when I was younger, sparked an interest in other people, other cultures, other places, travel, and just like mutual understanding and respect for others. I think that's a really beautiful book as well. The Come Over to My House, Come Over and Play, that concept that like there's a seat at the table for you, and let me show you my way of living, and let me see your way of living, in like a really simplistic way. I could go on and on about children's books. You really have unleashed something for me, but I'll stop there. Let's talk about the book club.
Okay. Well, if you want to start a book club with children or adults, we're just going to give you some tips from bookriot.com on how to start a book club that doesn't suck. And so you can read, obviously, with us. We'll have the Frugal Friends community on Facebook, or you can get people in your real life to read these books with you, which is even better. So the first tip is figure out who you're inviting to your book club. And this will be the most important choice you make because it will affect everything else about your book club, from where and when you meet to which books you read. Obviously, we already have a suggestion, but you could just have a 2-person book club, or you can invite as many people as you want. But think about some people you'd like to read a book with and invite them to read it with you.
And then, of course, you're going to want to define the purpose of your book club. Like, people want to know, what are we showing up here for? What are we what purpose are we gathered around? Is it to learn something new? Is it primarily to bond with coworkers or friends, catching up? Is it meeting new people? Is it a mixture? I think stating those things, like this article says, is going to be helpful so that you all can kind of have a clear picture of why you're gathering together.
Then decide if you're meeting online or in person. And I will add this caveat, not caveat, but I will add a sub-step is also decide if you're going to name your book club. So we are the Frugal Friends Book Club, but you can always be, the Daring Denver chapter or the Crazy Cleveland chapter or whatever you want to be.
Sky's the limit.
The sky
you can
is
really
the
get
limit.
creative.
Yeah. So if you want to meet in person and you're going to name it something locally themed, or maybe you want to meet online and it's just like we are teachers who can only meet Mondays at 5 chapter. So obviously you will come up with better names than I have.
Teachers who can only meet at 5.
I came up with the name Frugal Friends, and everything creative out of me ended after that. I was like, great, did my job. Nothing. Can't do anything
the Taco
else.
Bell chapter. We only read over tacos.
I would join that book club. Invite me to that chapter.
Next is figure out when your book club will take place. Obviously, if you're the teachers that only meet Mondays at 5, then you've got that figured out. But certainly, are you doing this monthly? Are you doing it every other month? Is it bi-weekly? What kind of timing are you trying to give? How much of the book are you intending to read each time? I know some people who do book clubs, it's like a book a month and they meet once a month and they have one time that they meet to talk about that book. But of course you could space it out more if you want to kind of do a few chapters at a time and you're meeting more regularly. That's really going to have to be a conversation as well of what's availability, when can we meet, how often.
Yeah. Then we'll skip 5, which is create a process to nominate books, because we've nominated them for you. So we will go to number 6, which is give your book club discussion some structure. So while we did tell you what to read, we're not telling you what to talk about. You can think of some ideas kind of based on like you can listen back to our interview with Derek Kinney before or after you read his book and kind of think of some things to talk about, or when we hopefully have other authors on. We'll see. But yeah, so the priority is to just give everyone in the book club a voice. Make sure everybody can say what they think or ask questions, that we make this as inclusive as possible. Some of the people in your book club are going to be more introverted than others. And while we don't want to force people to speak when they're uncomfortable, if you're going to attend a book club, you should be willing to say something. So let's go into this with the expectation that we're all here to participate. Some obviously will participate more than others, but take a chance, be bold, and go and say what you learned, what you loved, what you didn't.
Well, and there is probably going to need to be somebody facilitating the conversation. So whether that's the same person in every meeting that you have, or it's the person who it changes every time, or if you get to a point where you're in a book club where you are nominating the books, maybe it's the person who nominated that book. A lot of books will have guides for a book club discussion, things that you can ask about the book, but also within this article is a link to some questions that could be asked of any book club within a book club discussion. So if you're not sure where to start, there's plenty on the internet of here's just some generalized questions that often could get the conversation going about any given book. The number 7's more so along the lines of like picking books, like find a trusted site for book club reviews. That would be helpful if you're picking the book. But again, we gave you the book.
We tell you what to read.
Yeah. So then 8, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, thinking about how you will conduct your book club. And that's down to, facilitated discussion, when, where, how, why, who's hosting it, how you're getting together, all those things.
Yeah. So definitely recommend starting a chapter of the Frugal Friends Book Club in your community. And even if your friends don't know about Frugal Friends, maybe they want to get their, financial life together, and you're like, hey, join this book club with me and also listen to this very cool podcast, which is where I got these book ideas from. And then you've brought a listener into the fold, and that's very cool.
Yes, that'll be fun. Well, thank you everyone so much for listening. Many of you know that we have a private community where we do monthly money challenges and we offer accountability groups. And we want to take this time to congratulate one of our members for a big win. This one comes from Tanea. She shared a lot, so we're just going to pick a few of them because she's really crushing it. But here's what she says. I found Jen and Jill just over 1 month ago. The Spending Symposium weekend was my introduction to this new way of living and thinking about money. I've made some significant changes just in the past month. And for the first time, I have actually analyzed what I did, and here's what I found. So again, there's so much more to this list, but here you go. Here's some of what she did. Increased my savings balance by 27% this month. Decreased my spending by 87% this month. Initiated a long-term investment portfolio with a professional financial advisor. Opened my employer matching 401k account this month. Increased my income by 20% this month. Made my first 5% goal toward debt payoff this month. Eliminated 11 subscription/memberships totaling $259 a month. Savings that it equals that amount of savings, including Amazon Prime, which will save me untold millions over the course of my life. I just kind of, and again, it goes on and on.
Gosh.
That is an insane amount of progress for 1 month. I'm not under any assumptions that could be everyone's story, but you really crushed it.
Yeah,
well done.
Well done, Tanea. You are absolutely crushing it. And as a long haul trucker, so you're not in a normal 9-to-5 situation. You have a stressful job and you're still making all this progress, and you are really an inspiration to everyone that anyone can do this. So very, very proud of you.
And thank all of you, to those who are still listening to us. If you want to check out our monthly challenge community, head to frugalfriendspodcast.com/club to see what challenge we have coming up next, to read the rest of Tanea's list of what all she's accomplished and all of the other big wins and inspiration that's happening over there.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Frugal Friends is produced by Eric Siriani.
So rocks.
I have this sensory thing that I discovered at a young age, and it continues on to this day, that I really enjoy the sound of pebbles crunching, like beneath my feet or beneath tires. Like, if you've ever driven really slowly in a campground or a park, you know, where it's like 5, 10, 15 miles an hour and it's all kind of like a pebbly road and the pebbles are like crunching underneath the tires. I love that sound. So at one point, I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I decided that I wanted to recreate that sound. I was in my backyard, and at the time, the house that we lived in had sidewalk in the backyard. And I had a bike. I knew how to ride a bike, and I had collected pebbles, and I made a whole bike trail for myself along the sidewalk in our backyard so that I could ride my bike over the pebbles, so that I could hear the sound of rocks and pebbles crunching underneath my bike. And who knows how long that took me to and it was just like a trail, you know, so my bike tires had to stay along this maybe 3-inch span of pebbles that I laid out on the sidewalk. And I just kind of drove over it just so I could hear the sound. Well, this was at the time when camcorders existed, the big honkin' video recorders that my parents had that. And my mom knew that she was about to get some good content and pulled out this 20-pound video recorder up on her shoulder and started videotaping me, 6-year-old me with a little speech impediment. And clearly I had been playing dress up earlier in the day. I had red lipstick smeared all over my face and a headband, and I was still wearing this poofy dress, and now I was on to the next thing of creating a sensory experience for myself. And now here's the thing. My parents knew that they could get a rise out of me with certain things, and I would often do what they would call pitch a fit, throw a tantrum. Now,
they provoked this?
Sometimes they'd provoke it, and in this certain circumstance they did. So this is part of the only reason that I remember what happened is because of this video. So my mom's like, Jillian, what did you do? And I explained it, and she's like, did you think that was a good idea? And little 6-year-old me is like, not to you, maybe. This wasn't a good idea to you, maybe, but it was to me. And she's like, okay, but you are going to have to pick up every rock. You're going to have to clean this up. And I'm like, I know. And she's like, no, you're going to have to clean up all of the rocks. You have to make sure that there's no more rocks on the sidewalk. And it starts to click for me that this is a lot of rocks that I laid out. And I'm only 6. This feels impossible. How am I going to get every single rock off the sidewalk? So I start crying, every single walk. I kept saying that over and over. Every single walk. Cause I had a speech impediment. I couldn't say my R's. So it was walk and every single one, and this is going to be impossible for me. And it's all on video.
Oh my gosh.
If you're really nice to me, maybe that'll be something I charge you to see. It's really incriminating.
I don't want to see your mom elicit a stressful situation out of you at 6.
I know. It really does. It reveals a lot. It reveals a lot about me. It reveals a lot about my mom. It reveals a lot about my upbringing. But you know what? I can say rock now. like relatively normally. So we have grown.
You say all your words very well.
Thank you. And I do still like the sound of pebbles crunching under my tires and my feet.
Did you clean up the rocks?
Yes, I did. Probably not every single one, though. It's impossible. I really made an obstacle course.
Wow. You're still making obstacle courses in your adult life. And still not picking up every single walk.
No, not every single walk, just the important ones. Okay, bye.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Discover the heartwarming and hilarious world of sibling connections on Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson. Dive into family tales, explore the human mind, and laugh with guests like Joel and Benji Madden. It's more than a podcast, it's a celebration of the ties that bind us.
And it's fun because we've decided to open it up to really like all kinds of different siblings. And it's going to be an awesome season.
Listen to Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.